and I am the director of the Ohio Valley Museum of Discovery. I am also a student here at Ohio University in instructional technology. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about podcasting for education and how you can use podcasts in your classroom, podcasts that already exist, as well as learning a little bit about creating your own podcast. So, what exactly is a podcast? Many of you might be familiar with podcasts that you listen to on your own. There are plenty of things such as audio podcasts for entertainment. They're a source of news and information. They're something that is an on-demand media form. But I also would like you to think about how podcasting can be educational. It's a form of modern storytelling. And of course, we get to carry it around in our pockets wherever we go. Podcasting in the classroom is probably not something that you're familiar with, but there are so many benefits to both you and your students to being able to use podcasts. For the first one, and of course my favorite, is that it's free. I know that's something that a lot of teachers really struggle with, is finding resources for their classrooms. Podcasts are something that is available to everybody. They are accessible forms of information. A lot of podcasts are topical and creative. We can also use podcasts to build creativity in our students. Podcasting can be global and personal. It's anything that you want it to be. As teachers, it's often important to justify to your administrators how things can fit with standards. And podcasts are something that you can go out and find topics and subjects that you can fit in with standards in your classroom. They're very flexible. We can use podcasts in many different ways, and I'll outline a few of those in a minute. And of course, it's a relatively low-tech form of technology. There's media that we can all use, and it's not going to be super scary for those of you who are trying to introduce podcasting throughout your schools. Podcasts, like I said before, are on-demand and engaging for students. There is an estimated 124 million people who have said that they listen to podcasts. This makes up about 44% of the US population. So I think that that's going to continue to grow. There's a great research project by Edison Research that looks at how podcasts are used and how many people use them. And right now, there's a lot of information about how adults use podcasts, but we don't necessarily have a ton of research on how children use podcasts. So that's something that if you start to use them in your classrooms and you'd like to reach out to me afterwards, I would love to hear about how you're using them in your classroom. Of course, there are some challenges anytime that you want to start something new in your classes. The first one is just familiarity. Do you know what kind of podcasts are out there, what you can use, what types of topics that people have made podcasts about? There's this real lack of curation throughout the community. If you go on iTunes and you search the subject, try kids and family, a lot of those are not necessarily things that you're able to use in your classroom. So it's important that if you start to use this technology, that we all come together and tell each other about it, and we're able to find out a little bit more about how we're using it. There's also a lack of existing lessons and models. And this is another place where we can share as educators to show what we've done in the classroom. And of course, if you're familiar with trying to introduce any technology into your classrooms, there's always a little bit of technophobia. And whether that comes from parents or other teachers or administrators in your schools, we just need to be aware of that. The students aren't going to be afraid of it, though. Of course, I know as a former public school teacher, one of the things that is really a struggle in any classroom is a lack of time. How do we fit everything in that we need to do all the time? How do we connect with standards? It can be a little bit overwhelming. But, I want you to maybe think about the many different ways that you can use podcasts in the classroom, as well as extension activities outside of the classrooms. As a museum director, I like to try and share with people who come to the museum and people who follow us on social media some different subjects that they might want to learn more about, and some things that they can do in an audio format. A kind of a different option that you might not think about is that podcasting offers a great jump off for project-based learning. So if you have a project in mind, or maybe you're looking for more information to base projects on, there's some great resources at the end of this that I've linked to, where teachers have taken podcasts that they listen to and actually went out. One of the classrooms adopted a whale and looked at the environmental impacts that they learned just by listening to some of the scientists in the podcast. Of course, one of the buzzwords in our field is the flipped classroom. You can introduce a topic by sending a podcast home with parents so that the students can get an idea about it before they come in. Language learning activities are fantastic with podcasts. And keep in mind that students are often open to things that are beyond what they're familiar with. And of course, I don't like the term busy work, but if you have something that your students are doing that they're not necessarily engaging their brains on, maybe it's cutting, learning to cut along the lines, and you want to create an environment for your students, think about maybe incorporating podcasts as a way to listen while they work. One of my favorite ways to think about how we can use this audio format in our classrooms is to model storytelling. I know that a lot of teachers are looking for ways in which to teach students how to write stories and how do we figure this out. Podcasts offer us a platform as both a way to listen to how stories are produced, as well as maybe even coming up with their own ideas for stories. So additionally, if you have any quiet, or what I like to say, focus transitions in your classroom, you might want to maybe split up a podcast throughout the day. Give them 5 minutes at a time so that they're waiting for that next step. It gives us a chance to really dig deeper into content. A lot of podcasts right now have access to people that I might not have access to. So if you can reach out to scientists or experts in the field, sometimes you get a different perspective on difficult subjects. I've also found it interesting that students can actually listen about 2 to 3 grades above their reading level. So if they're reading and they can comprehend those things that they're listening to that they might not yet be ready to read. So one of the ways to incorporate that in the classroom is to use a transcription of a podcast that they can listen along and follow as they're reading. And it gives us a different approach maybe than audiobooks. Another great way to think about podcasting is just a connection to the outside world. Sometimes we and our students get involved in our bubbles and we think about just how we are in our everyday lives, and we don't always get a chance to connect to the broader world. So podcasts can really open up those doors. So now you're ready, you're on board, you want to produce a podcast. Now what? So let me just give you a couple resources so that you can get started with some podcasts. Of course, you need some sort of device. On Apple devices, you can use a podcast app. They also, on different devices, you can use what are called pod catchers. I think that's a silly term, but programs like Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Google Play Music. So just about every platform, every different device has some sort of podcasting available on it. I tend to use Overcast, and this is not a commercial, but I can change the speed, I can change the tempo of the speech on that, so in a pretty sophisticated way. I have a whole list here for you of different podcasts that are available. I think that because I work at a Discovery Museum, I tend towards places where I can find different scientific topics and STEM and STEAM topics. So podcasts like Brains On, Wow in the World, the Tumble Science podcast for kids, and there's several others listed here. We even have some like Story Pirates where students can write in their stories and they transform them into songs. And I think that's just a really neat way and maybe a different platform that you could try in your classroom. Something that just came out really recently is that the Wow in the World podcast has a National Science Foundation funded research project where they're looking at how to better use podcasts in the classroom and find out how we can make them more playful and introduce children more to this world. Of course, as the students age, You might be able to utilize some different types of podcasts that you listen to as an adult. Things like This American Life and Radio Lab, Planet Money, How Stuff Works. There's a lot out there that is available and appropriate for children. You just maybe need to give it a listen first and find some topics that interest you and might be related to what you're teaching. Of course, there's even more. You might want to screen for the language. Things like Radio Lab Presents More Perfect, TED Radio Hour, Every Little Thing. There's a whole list for you on here. I don't need to read through all of them, but that gives you just an idea of the depth of content that's available. As we progress through some of these, you might even look at some for more mature students, maybe in upper level high school students if you're around and teaching them. But again, I give you that warning, that caveat of listen to it first and make sure that this is what you want. And this is where you get your code for the credit. It's right there. It's PE12. So make sure that you enter that in order to get your credit for listening to this. So that brings me to the difference between consumers of podcasts and creators of podcasts. I've talked a lot about how we can listen to podcasts and use it as a way to jump off and really dig into different topics. But one of the wonderful ways to utilize podcasts in your classroom might be to actually have the students create their own. So what are some of those things that you might need to make your own podcast? Of course, you need a microphone and a digital device, and that's really all you need to start with, right? You can keep it very simple. I'm going to bring in right now an educator friend as an expert to kind of talk a little bit about some of the podcasting projects that she's done. This is Shannon Williams.
Hi, my name is Shannon Williams, and I am a music teacher of 17 years now at the Plains Elementary here in Athens City Schools. And I want to share with you a slideshow that I made for my students to create their own podcast. When you view this slideshow, consider it as a music slideshow for my music classroom. It isn't necessarily something that you'll want to copy and use verbatim, but it could be a useful place to start out and give you an idea of what types of things you might want to include on your slideshow. So the podcasting slide book has a number of slides that really it's a script that the students will fill in the blanks kind of project. When I do it in my classroom, I only have 40-minute periods with the kids, so I don't have a lot of time to work through the process of writing. But if you are a writing teacher or you're doing this in more of an English language arts type of experience, you might want to spend more time on them actually writing from scratch. So there are several slides included here that have a script that goes through step by step, and then it takes them through the recording process as well and talks them through editing and listening to it and more the technical aspect. It's very brief. It doesn't go highly in depth because of the time limitations that I have, but again, it's just a starting point for you. Once you're done going over that, then you'll want to go in and check out the rest of our lesson that we have here. Once you're done looking at the slidebook lesson that your students can use, then you can check out some of the resources that have been included in this presentation. There's a slide that describes two different tools that you can use to record your podcasts with your students. One is called BandLab and the other is GarageBand. And a lot of people are familiar with GarageBand. It comes free with all Apple products. You can get it on the iPhone, iPads, on your desktop or laptop computers. It's something that a lot of people are familiar with. So if you're comfortable using GarageBand and you have Apple products, go for it. It's great. It's the definition of what this tool was designed to be. But if you don't have Apple products, which a lot of schools don't, many schools nowadays have Chromebooks, and Chromebooks are cheap and easy to come by. So I found a tool that works with a Chromebook called BandLab. It's free, and the best part is it's designed for educators. There's a safe environment that kids can upload their products, things that they've made, and share it in a safe, closed environment. It has all of the features of GarageBand. It has loops, it has mixing capabilities. It's full service. So there's a link here on using it. There's also been a couple of links to tutorial videos that you could look at to get you started on using BandLab. Highly recommend it and find it very easy to use.
So you've started with creating your own podcast for your students, and now you're thinking about, well, how am I going to assess this project? I highly recommend not reinventing the wheel. There are already some rubrics out there that are available, including ones that even use things like Bloom's taxonomy. There's a couple examples here from 2008 and 2010. So the ideas have been around for a little while. You can tie your podcasting concepts to standards. And I would especially recommend bringing in the concepts of things like digital citizenship and critical thinking, communication skills, maybe some of those soft skills that you might not necessarily get throughout the rest of your day. Of course, this is another great way to involve the students in it and to give them a little bit more autonomy over what they want to learn and what they want to produce. They can share their podcast with each other and can also help to critique each other. So I also included here in your resources a little bit about some of the editing software if you want to go on to that next level. As Shannon says, that BandLab is a really great product, but there's also things like Audacity, WavePad, Adobe Audition, MicNote. Keep in mind, though, that as soon as you start getting into these other products, you start losing out on those free resources. So that's something just to keep in the back of your heads. If you want to go big and host your podcast and allow the students to produce it and then send it out to their parents at home, SoundCloud is an easy, free way to do that. There's also some more listed here. So if you really want to dig in and you're into gear, I'm going to put a couple things up here. You don't have to. Like I said, you can start with just a digital device and a microphone, but for a little bit extra, and you can add just a simple USB mic like a Yeti Blue or a Rode Podcaster, then you can start to up your audio level. If you want to pick up headphones for the students, I often find that with our museum, we're able to find some of these products used. There are also grants available, and I know that we're all competing for that and out for the same stuff. So keep in mind that you don't need to make this into a major production, but if your students get really into it and want to make a quality production, there are the gear stuff available that you might want to check out. You can even go as far as getting some extra recorders, Zoom recorders to take out on the road. They can go out on interviews, lavalier mics, just as a possibility. But let's keep it simple to begin with. I really thank you for your time today, and I hope that if you have any questions that you reach out to either myself or to Shannon. We've got all of our contact information on here, and especially if you start to look for resources to use podcasts in your classroom, I would love to hear how those go. And if your students make some, please send them my way and I can share them. Thank you.